The recent unrest across parts of the Middle East is continuing to fuel the price of crude oil. Libya, with the greatest oil reserves in Africa, is at the forefront of discussions, with concerns that output could be disrupted if the unrest continues.
Well, environmental experts say there has never been a better time to make real changes before oil runs out, with green-friendly energy becoming more important than ever.
The headquarters for the United Nations International Renewable Energy Agency, or IRENA, was established in the UAE 2 years ago. Until then, there was no single body whose sole purpose was the promotion of renewable energy.
The agency will hold its first assembly next month, marking its official and legal launch, and electing Abu Dhabi as its permanent seat. I sat down with Adnan Amin, the Interim Director General of IRENA, to discuss the meeting's outcomes and to find out how the agency has become the voice of renewable energy.
Well, this is a critical moment because the last 2 years has been preparatory work. The political arrangements, the institutional arrangements, the legal arrangements, how we're going to organize this, what's the vision of the organization, and all the member countries have to be comfortable that their issues are finding expression in IRENA. The significance of this moment is where all of this comes together and you have the newest intergovernmental organization in the world being formed. And the other significance is it's the first time in this region that you have a headquarters of an international organization. So it is a very significant moment.
Now, obviously, renewable energy is such a big talking point today. BP have even come out and said that the world could run out of oil by the year 2050. So while the use of renewable energy has sharply increased over the past decade, and in fact it's expected to triple between 2008 up to 2035, we do need to accelerate this further. But with 1.6 billion people around the world still without access to electricity, is it a realistic goal to set for developing nations? How can policymakers help them along?
I think you put your finger on the critical challenge for us. Not only do we have about 1.5 billion people with no access to modern energy services. Imagine your own life without access to modern energy services. But there are about 1 billion people without access to reliable energy services, so intermittent, unreliable services. You have almost half the world's population subjected to this. And I don't think it's a tenable solution either from a moral viewpoint or from the sustainability of our current economic and political model to go on like this. We have to provide for them. So in my view, the three challenges for us are energy access, which is meeting the energy needs of the poor. Most of them, 85% of those who are deprived of energy services are in rural areas and in peri-urban areas, which means that in many developing countries that are capital constrained, you have very limited possibilities of developing huge grid architecture that can reach those people. Renewable energy provides you with a decentralized solution, and there are a lot of possibilities we are seeing now with island solutions, with decentralized energy models, with microgrids at the village and town level. So all of this is coming up. So energy access is the principal issue for us. I think second issue is energy security. You have to see energy in the broader economic context. When you have a highly volatile regime of prices and countries are dependent on oil and gas imports, every time you have a price spike, it risks knocking a couple of percentage points off the growth of developing countries, and that impacts all the way down to the people in that country. How do you assure price stability? How do you ensure energy security is another area where I think renewable energy presents a tremendous potential. And the third, of course, is carbon emissions, reducing carbon emissions and contributing to climate change mitigation, which is a huge aspect. But I think this is a win-win scenario where you can actually meet climate needs by meeting development needs.
Now, touching a bit more on the carbon emissions there, what do you think the solution is? Should we be rewarding countries who've got a small carbon footprint or penalising those with a large carbon output? Obviously in Australia, very recently, we've just seen them introduce a carbon tax that will see a charge of about $20 to $30 per tonne of emissions. Should we be looking at a similar global agreement?
There are a lot of examples out there. In many countries now you have charges on emissions. You have in urban areas in many developed countries some kind of cost of owning certain types of cars or energy use. So there are a lot of examples. What we haven't been able to do, we've been unsuccessful in negotiating a global agreement on carbon emission limitation. And I think, I've been involved in that discussion for a long, long time. And I'm beginning to feel that perhaps we are investing in the wrong place by waiting for an agreement like that. What we need to do now is start to look at what are the bottom-up solutions, and carbon price is one of them. But there are many solutions, and I think from our perspective, it's not a question of rewarding or punishing, as attractive as the punishment part of it looks. But I think the issue is really about how do we enable solutions and how do we motivate and incentivize people to go in a direction that is meeting those objectives. And I think that the consciousness among governments certainly is growing about this as a possibility. We need to do much more in communicating this message, and advocates like you would be tremendously helpful here, but in communicating this message to the broader public that this is not some fringe issue we're talking about. This is a technology that is becoming ripe. This is an alternative that the world has at its fingertips, and what we need to find are really the ways and the commitment of how we're going to make this happen.